Your attitude is not going to change all the situation and the circumstances and the fact, but it's the main thing that's going to allow you to still be moving forward, to reflect on, okay, I don't have to be in this place of where my emotions are out of control and I'm, death spiraling in this thing, but I can reflect and begin to say, okay, I can maybe detach a little bit. I can separate the situation from my response to it. Yeah. And I think that only happens from a place of reflection and not reaction.
Yeah.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Shift podcast, where we're all about helping leaders and entrepreneurs and small business owners take the steps to get to the next level personally and professionally. I'm Matt Ware, joined by my co-host, Evan Weiland. We're excited to be with you today. And I want to talk about when the worst thing is actually the best thing. And I'm going to open by just telling a story about something that happened to me a couple weeks ago as of the date of this recording. I opened my laptop on a Monday morning to get a email from a client telling me that they no longer had need of my services. You're fired, right?
Fired,
Hearing that in the Donald Trump voice. And so, this is not uncommon for agency owners, right? Because there is churn with clients. I have a very good relationship with this client. We got good results for them, but they were very open about kind of their financial state. They were moving some things around. They were in a cash crunch. So not a total surprise, but still a disappointment.
But on a Monday.
Right? And on a Monday, right? Like, you don't want to get fired on any day, but especially on Monday. And I say getting fired, and we say it a little bit tongue in cheek, but when you own an agency, when you provide service-based business, that really what it is, right? This client is saying, I don't want to work with you anymore, right? So that is effectively what the message is. And so, like anyone else, I had that immediate sort of death spiral and discouragement. It was not a great way to start the day or the week, but I was able, because I've learned how to do this, I was able to turn what felt like the worst thing into the best thing for me.
Awesome.
There's a couple principles that I employed in that situation because I've learned how to do this in my leadership journey. And that's kind of what we want to unpack today. How do you turn what feels like in the moment the worst thing that could happen into what's actually the best thing? The two principles that I use are reflect and reframe.
Reflect and reframe.
Reflect and reframe. So let me start with the first one. I'll start with reflection. I think for anybody in a situation like that, there is going to be that initial emotional, right? Like there's the discouragement, the pit in your stomach,
the trigger.
Yeah, totally. The trigger. Like when you open that email, like you can project the kind of emotion I was feeling in that moment, right? Like you've probably experienced similar things yourself. That's normal. The last thing I would want our audience to take away is to say that feeling that emotion isn't normal. Like I don't care how long you've been in business. I don't care how good you are at what you do. There's always an emotional component to who you are as a leader. And so you can't ignore that. You can't deny that. You can't pretend like it doesn't exist. That's part of the human experience. But moving as quickly as you can from a reaction to reflection, I think is a really big thing. Yep. And that can feel very, nuanced. But really, I think what this is the ability to separate the emotion of my emotional reaction to a reflection that maybe is happening at a little bit more mental and maybe slightly detached in a healthy way point of view.
Yeah. And it's kind of grounded in our biology, right? It's like we have two brains. One way to look at it is this reactionary sort of fight, flight, freeze. And it's really grounded in our biology, right? It's like we have two brains.
Yeah.
We have one brain that is dispositioned toward fight and flight and freeze, right? And then we have the other part of the brain that's in charge of executive functions and logic and thinking through things. Yep. And it's like, which brain am I going to tap into today, right? Which one am I going to give a relinquished control to?
Well, yeah, and you're really right. It is like having two brains, right? These things are both functioning simultaneously. And it's not that we want one and not the other, right? Because we actually need both to keep us alive and keep us functioning.
And to be human.
Yeah, exactly, right? But we do have to decide which part of our brain are we giving power to. Sure. So you've heard the saying that it's not about what happens to you, it's about what happens in you. And I think this is kind of along the same lines, right? Like what happens to me, that's an external thing. And that's what I'm going to react to. But what happens in me, this is an internal thing, that's more of a reflection point. And so I think in these moments where something bad happens, we're using it as an example in business, but extrapolate this out into other areas of life. You can have financial crisis, you can have a relational, sort of breakdown. There's all a health issue maybe. There are all kinds of ways in which you can face in a moment's notice, just like me popping open an email, you can face these moments where it feels like the world is crashing around you and you have no control. There are things that are happening to you. And so you're going to react. And I think what we're trying to say is, and certainly what I have tried to train myself to do and did in this situation is, how can I take a step back and actually reflect? How can I be less focused on what happened to me and focus more about what's happening in me during this situation? There
is a mindset there. I think there is a decision to make. Am I going to just continue feeling this thing, or am I going to reflect on it? And here's an interesting question. Do you think that there's any utility in focusing on the thing that's happened to you?
I don't know if I can answer whether there's utility or not, because that may be nuanced depending on the person's situation. What I would say is that I don't think it's healthy or wise to pretend like this thing didn't happen, right? Like acknowledging our reality is a really important thing. And I think sometimes as leaders, as entrepreneurs, because we have so much drive and passion and dream and vision, and we want to see the positives all the time, we can sometimes sweep the negatives under the rug, right? And just like pretend this didn't happen, pretend it doesn't affect me, pretend like let's just lock the door and throw away the key type of thing. And I don't think that serves us well, because eventually those things that we suppress are going to sort of come back to the surface. And I'm not a mental health professional, but I've dealt with enough of my own things to know that when you try to stuff it, it's probably going to come up in ways that you don't want it to. So I don't know if there's utility in all of that. I do know that it's ill-advised to ignore it.
Ill-advised. I like that. Well, I think the school of thought there is this locus of control, not focusing on the thing that happened to you, but focusing on what you just said, what's happening in you. Right. And I think there's a utility in that.
I think locus of control is a great phrase to use for it, because you can't control what happened to you. You can control what happens in you.
Totally.
Not that that's always easy to do, because sometimes it feels like even in our own, minds and hearts and whatever, that it feels like things are out of control, but we know when we take a step back and a deep breath, we can control that. So I think that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah. And I think it does come down to attitude, right? By having that locus of control and focusing on what's happening in you, it is attitude. And John Maxwell said, attitude isn't everything, but it's the main thing.
Your attitude is not going to change all the situation and the circumstances and the fact, but it's the main thing that's going to allow you to still be moving forward, to reflect on, okay, I don't have to be in this place of where my emotions are out of control and I'm, death spiraling in this thing, but I can reflect and begin to say, okay, I can maybe detach a little bit. I can separate the situation from my response to it. And I think that only happens from a place of reflection and not reaction.
As entrepreneurs, we're faced with this every day.
Well, I don't get fired every day. I don't know if you do, but
that'd be one crazy client list. If you could afford to be fired every day.
Maybe.
One every day of the week and still maintain business. But as entrepreneurs, it is honestly an unending battle of just making the decision to constantly reflect on things. Whether it's a bad review came in or your payment processor got shut down. These two things happened to me literally in the last 2 weeks.
Speaking from a little personal experience, right?
Only a little bit. So it's an attitude thing.
It is.
It's a mindset thing, but having a framework, man, that really helps.
Just recognizing this is a skill that can be developed. I think sometimes we are tempted to think of these things as, well, this is just my personality. This is just the way I'm wired, all of that. And there might be a starting point of that's true, but this is a skill that you can develop. And I can say that from my own story, because I have been fired by other clients in the past, not been able to make this turn to make that shift from reaction to reflection very quickly or very well. Whereas this only took me a matter of, a few hours. There have been times in the past where I went through something and it took me what felt like days or weeks to kind of get over the emotional hurdle of all of that. So it is a skill that can be developed.
I like that. So we just spent a few minutes talking about reflecting. I want to spend a few minutes talking about reframing.
Okay.
There's the word in there, frame, right? I love frameworks. I think we all need a framework to reframe the situation. Mine, it's Romans 8:28, right? All things work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose.
Yeah.
This gives me a really good mindset or framework for moving through a situation. I know with confidence that this situation is only going to get good, or it's only going to work out for my benefit.
Right.
That gives me confidence, that gives me peace. And I think that we all need frameworks like reflecting and reframing to move through the situation emotionally.
Yeah. Well, and I think what reframing really does is it takes something that on the surface, if you just looked at the facts, this would seem bad, but I'm going to reframe this thing that anybody looking outside in would say is bad. I'm going to reframe it as actually something that's good, something that's positive. And again, I think this is a skill that has to be developed, but like you said, this is a mindset, because we can choose to see this as the worst thing or the best thing, right? I mean, that's what we're titling this episode, when the worst thing is actually the best thing. And I'll tell you a story about where I first was sort of exposed to that idea and how I've kind of learned to do it. So there is a guy that I've looked up to for years and years as sort of a leadership mentor from afar. His name's Michael Hyatt. Some of you in our audience may know of him. He's the founder of the Full Focus company, Full Focus Planners, which I've used for, 7 or 8 years now. I'm not endorsed by them, but I use them and I wholeheartedly, support them. So if you need, if you're coming in, we're coming into the start of the new year. If you want to get on track to set goals and stay highly productive, Full Focus Planners are the way to go. But Michael Hyatt tells the story, and this is way back before he started Full Focus. He was the CEO of a major publishing company, and he tells the story that he'd been with this company forever, had been a division head, and was eventually promoted to CEO. And I think I'll get all the facts straight, but even if there's a little bit of variance, the point of the story will play. So he gets promoted to CEO, major publishing house, really big deal, the highest level of his career. This is within like the first couple of weeks that he has become the CEO. He's rushing out the door one morning to get to work. He's going down the stairs, grabbing his briefcase, grabbing his coffee, and he trips going down the stairs and falls and breaks his ankle.
Oh, wow. And
so what ensued is he basically was confined to bed rest for 6 weeks because he could put no weight, he couldn't walk or do anything. And so doctor's orders were basically stay home and stay in bed, keep it elevated and iced and, the whole thing, right? So CEO of a major company, and in the first couple of weeks can't even go to the office, right? And this is before the Zoom days. This is before you could do everything remote. So here he is sequestered at home, can't effectively lead this huge organization he's just been tasked to lead. And he reflected and reframed this, again, where I learned the concept around the idea that he felt like this was the worst thing in the world. At this moment in his career, when he had just achieved this major position, now he can't even do the thing that he's supposed to do. But as he sort of walked through the process, what he realized is that there were things he couldn't do. He couldn't go to the office. He couldn't have the meetings. He couldn't sit in the conference room. He couldn't do all of that. What he could do is stay at home where there were no interruptions, where there were no, all the things that happen in the office environment, and he could start planning and strategizing and getting vision for the new chapter of this company's future. If that had not happened to him, he would have actually not had the opportunity or never taken the opportunity to go through that process. And so as he reflected on that, and this is what the tool that he sort of arms people with is you have to be able to ask the question in these situations, what does this make possible? This is a terrible thing. On the surface, this is a horrible thing that happened, but what does it make possible?
Right.
In his situation, what it made possible was the ability to have vision and strategize and all of that. And of course, in everybody's situation, there's going to be a different answer to that. I think this is what we're talking about when we say this is a shift that you have to make. This is a mindset change. How do I reframe it and ask the question, what does this make possible?
And I mean, you could personalize this. This is, this could be for your business. This could be for your personal life. As you tell your story, I think about this guy that I listen to, Myron Golden. He always says, there's no such thing as a one-sided situation. He's like, have you ever seen a one-sided pancake? Have you ever seen a one-sided coin? Right. And so it's like, there isn't really any such thing as a one-sided situation. There's always a good with the bad, right? It's like Romans 8:28 says. It's like the end result of that.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think what this reframing does is it allows you to maybe see that there's a gift in this situation, the blessing in disguise type of thing. Like, yeah, on the surface, this is terrible, but there's actually something good that's hidden in this. Yeah. I may not always see it right away. It may not be until there's a lot of hindsight, that weeks or months or years down the road.
Right.
But I have this sort of fundamental belief that what feels like the worst thing could actually be the best thing.
Totally.
If I give it enough time, if there's enough time, a long enough time horizon, this thing is going to change. My perspectives on it is going to change. And so, in my situation, what happened a couple of weeks ago when I, was fired by this client, it was really interesting because, like I said, my initial reaction, of course, was the discouragement and feeling the defeat of that. But because I've learned how to ask that question, what does this make possible? I very quickly was able to reframe this. And what's interesting is that in the weeks leading up to that day, there were some things that I actually wanted to put some time and energy into in growing another part of my business, specifically around leadership coaching and business consulting, which is something I'm super passionate about.
Totally.
I kept feeling like I didn't have the capacity to do everything I was doing. I'm running this marketing agency, and there's this other stuff that I want to get to that right now is feeling like a side hustle or it's a hobby project, and I want it to become, I want to put more energy into it, but I don't have the bandwidth for it. And so what I quickly realized is losing this client, guess what? That opened up a whole bunch of hours in my week.
Love it.
So now this thing I actually wanted to be doing anyway, I suddenly had the opportunity to do. And if I hadn't gotten fired, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right. What felt like the worst thing became the best thing that could have happened to me to actually move forward.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of that, even the financial setback, like, okay, you lose the client, you lose that monthly retainer or whatever. I made so much progress on the coaching and consulting side of my business in those first, few weeks after this happened that I will more than make up for the revenue loss, from losing that client.
I love that. And can I emphasize here, this isn't just positive thinking.
No, it's definitely not positive because I was not thinking positively for a few hours. I can tell you that.
Yeah, Matt didn't work himself into some good situation by thinking positively.
Right, just put out good vibes.
Right.
I'm going to manifest.
No, but I think you knew that there was power in reframing the situation.
Yeah.
And you did make the most of it. But don't be mistaken, there was a decision to stop, reflect, and reframe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, it's not something I'm like uniquely gifted to do. It's just a skill that I've developed over time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm the most positive person in the world, like optimist, glasses always half full, because I'm not.
Yeah.
But I have learned with experience, with time, all of those things to say the faster I can shift from reaction to reflection, and then the faster I can start to reframe the situation, the better for me, for everybody around me, for the situation, for the business, all of that.
Let me ask you this before we wrap up here. When does that take place exactly? Is it kind of in your car? Do you slow down and at home and hang out for a second? Is it in the closet of stress while you're sitting there freaking out about losing the client? And when does this actually happen?
Well, I mean, every situation, I suppose, is different. You can't control when the email comes or the phone call comes or, whatever that is. I will say for me, I frequently am able to reflect and reframe the best and the most when I'm actually out on a run.
Nice.
And so, I run almost every day, 5 or 6 days a week.
Got the endorphins going.
Well, you have the endorphins going. I run outside. I refuse to run inside on a treadmill. I don't care how cold it is, how snowy it is,
You're
whatever.
Not a mouse.
No,
You're not a rat.
I'm running outside. So you've got fresh air. You're not on a screen. You're kind of forced to be out of contact with the world for those few minutes. And I think there's something powerful to that. And there's a lot of research actually on the idea that your brain is sort of opened up in different ways when you're in motion.
Totally.
Whether you're running or walking or lifting, whatever your thing is. I'm not prescribing a specific, fitness routine, but it's just the idea of when you're in motion, your brain is open in a different way.
So good.
And so for me, that's what's super helpful. It's one of the reasons that I run and work out. It's not just for the physical benefit, but for the mental and emotional benefit.
So I want to take a second to encourage the audience. If you've just had a big setback, maybe just happened today, you're in it, you're feeling it, I want to encourage you to slow down, put yourself in an environment where you can reflect and reframe. Those things don't come naturally. They're not going to happen if you don't slow down. So go on a run, go on a hike, take a walk, go on a long drive, put yourself in a situation where that becomes easier. And I think it's going to be super, super helpful.
to maybe bring it back full circle to what happened in this situation.
Oh yeah, please.
I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that I got fired now.
You okay now?
Yeah, I'm good now, but
licked your wounds.
Right,
all good?
all of that, because of these principles. But I think there's, in this particular case, there's a real silver lining in it as well, because this client that fired me, on the marketing agency side, a few days after that came back and asked if they could actually put me on a consulting contract.
Man, awesome.
Which is amazing, because number one, it says that we really did have a good relationship, right? So you feel good about that. But two, as I mentioned earlier, like that's actually part of the shift that I've been making anyway. I mean, I'm still doing marketing and I've got that agency and it's going great. But personally, I wanted to invest more time and energy on the coaching and consulting side. And so not only did the whole thing free up my time and energy to direct to that, but this very client actually wants me to engage in that way.
Awesome.
And so I think, again, that's where the reflect and reframe thing really does work.
Yeah. In the end, it worked out to your benefit.
For sure.
I think here's the nugget. If we can just learn to put ourselves in that state of mind earlier in the journey,
right?
It's really not that big of a deal.
Right. In 5 years, this won't matter at all.
Maybe even in 3 days.
Seriously.
Right? To put ourselves in that state of mind that all things do work out.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yep. By life experience, we know that it probably is going to be okay.
Based on past experience.
Right. Like there's almost nothing that happened a year ago, a month ago, a week ago that even matters. And I realize there are caveats to that. There are life-changing traumas. So we're not talking about that. But in general, these sort of regular ups and downs that we go through in life and business, usually with a little bit of perspective, hindsight being 2020, they're not nearly as big of a deal as they feel like in the moment.
Hey, if you found this episode helpful, encouraging, we'd love it if you dropped a comment, like, share, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.